Do injections like semaglutide and tirzepatide affect cortisol levels? That's what we're diving into on the podcast today.
Welcome to She's Healthy, a podcast for ambitious women on their journey to become the healthiest version of themselves. I'm your host, Lori Aikman.
All right, welcome back to the She's Healthy podcast. My name is Lori Aikman. I am your host. I'm a nurse practitioner based out of Florida. I own and operate a direct primary care practice, as well as a health coaching practice for persons outside of the state of Florida. And we really use a functional medicine approach. A lot of the patients we work with and clients we work with are highly ambitious women who are just not going to settle for normal, right? And want to feel as good as they can. So these episodes we bring you here through the podcast are to help you understand what's going on in your body so that you can live your best life, right? To feel as good as you can feel, to clear up the confusion. There's so much confusion, even as a healthcare practitioner. There's so many varying opinions, and you should do this or that. It's hard to know what's really right for you and what's going to help you feel your best. So through this podcast, we bring you these informational episodes to help you do just that, understand your body through a functional medicine lens, so that you can feel the way you want to feel. You can feel better than you even thought possible, many of our patients and clients say. So I want to tell you before we dive in, I do have to give you my medical disclaimer. Just as I've said, this podcast is for informational purposes only. It does not constitute direct medical advice. Make sure that you work with your doctor, your practitioner, your healthcare provider before making changes to your routine. Okay. So we got that out of the way. I'm going to dive in. If you guys are not new to the podcast, have been watching, I've got my riser on at my desk. And so I'm experimenting with recording while standing up. I sit too much at my desk on client calls, patient calls, and doing podcasts and other recordings. So we'll see how this goes today. Okay, so what we're going to dive into today is, do these injections, semaglutide, tirzepatide. So semaglutide again is Ozempic and Wegovy. Tirzepatide is the brand medications Mounjaro and Zepbound. So do these medications affect cortisol levels? And I'm going to tell you they do. But a little bit of background on this. So if you're new to the podcast, I talk a lot about cortisol and how cortisol affects our body, throws off our hormones, and a lot of things like that. And you probably have heard, I talk to patients sometimes and they're like, I think it must be a cortisol problem, right? I think there is this growing awareness of how that stress hormone, cortisol, does affect our body. And so there's a lot of other episodes that you can dive into. I encourage you, again, if this is your first episode that you've listened to, go ahead and take a listen to some of the other episodes we have. But just to give you a little background, a little recap, cortisol, as I've said, is our stress hormone. So when our body is under stress, and this can be psychological stress, this can just be the demands of life. This can also be inflammation, infection, chronic disease can stress our body. And what happens is that fight or flight, our nervous system is actually triggered, and our adrenal glands release cortisol, which is our stress hormone. Okay. So with that said, so how might these weight loss drugs like semaglutide or tirzepatide affect those cortisol levels? Okay, so I actually did find a study that talks about this. So I had a way that I was going to talk about this, just how really these injections are going to affect. They do affect the release of cortisol, as this study has shown. But these injections are also going to affect the impact that cortisol has on our body. So I was telling you again, your adrenal glands release cortisol, that stress hormone, and this is a protective thing. So sometimes people think of, okay, well, that's a bad thing. I need to be out of stress and I won't be making cortisol. We do need normal levels of cortisol every day. So cortisol should rise in the morning when we wake up. We get energy for the day. It actually makes a little curve where it's going to, I have to look, which way am I showing? I'm trying to think which way you guys are going to see this on the screen. So cortisol is going to rise up in the morning, give us energy for the day, and then cortisol should slowly decrease throughout the day. We want it to be low at night. There's an inverse relationship with cortisol and melatonin. We want melatonin to come up so we can rest and sleep well at night. So cortisol is a good thing in the right situation, in the right amounts. But one thing that cortisol does, cortisol is a protective thing. It's going to help us. Our body is always going to do certain things to protect itself, to get back to normal, to try and keep things, as even keel as possible. So one of the things that cortisol does is under stress, right? Our body, think fight or flight, right? If you've ever learned fight or flight, a lot of times people call it running from the bear. So you would encounter a bear in the wild, your fight or flight is going to trigger so that you have energy to run away. And one of the things it does is it's going to cause your body to release sugar into your bloodstream so that your muscles, your cells have energy to, again, fight the situation or flee. Well, the problem is, what if, our stressful work environment is doing this. Being a parent, I am a parent of 3 children under 4. So I'm sure my cortisol is being triggered at times just from the stress sometimes of parenting, right? I had all 3 kids at the doctor this morning. It was a handful. But things like that, right? Think of these not necessarily life or death situations. You may encounter some of those, but these situations where your fight or flight may be triggered, and you're getting this release of sugar into your bloodstream, when when you're just sitting at your desk and typing away, right? So that is something that I see in all of the women that I work with. Again, we work with highly ambitious women, who are a lot of times doing healthy things. They're exercising, they're eating right, and they're just not seeing the results of that in their body like they desire. And what we find across the board is that these women have higher than optimal, when we look through a functional medicine lens or optimal lens, we see that these women have higher than optimal blood sugar levels and insulin levels, and that causes them to gain weight. Okay. So when we look at using a medication like tirzepatide or semaglutide, one of the ways these medications work, again, I explained this all in a previous episode, so I encourage you to go back and check out those other episodes. It was towards the beginning of the year where we did a series on the GLP-1s and GIP. But one of the things that these injections do is they cause a release in our incretin hormones. So these are hormones that are released in the gut in response when we eat. And one of the things it does is it helps with our blood sugar and insulin. And so what we find is that one of the ways that these medications help people to lose weight is that it does help to regulate your blood sugar and insulin levels. Okay. So in one way, these injections help with cortisol levels is they're going to help with the downstream effect of cortisol. Okay. So again, we're in fight or flight. And I will tell you, if you are a woman in America, I mean, I primarily work with women, but I've seen it in men plenty as well. But I think just culturally, right? We are not these like relaxed, happy-go-lucky people. Many of us are like, go, go, go. Okay, get up in the morning, get the kids to school, go to work, do all the things, come home. But, we just live a very hurried lifestyle compared to some other cultures. And I think culturally it's making us sick. It's driving up cortisol, which is behind a lot of diseases like diabetes, of course, like heart disease, like high blood pressure, like dementia, things like that. And so I'm sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent here. These medications, again, the semaglutide and tirzepatide, are going to work on that downstream effect that we see from having high cortisol. Again, high cortisol is gonna come from stress. It's going to drive up blood sugar and insulin, causing weight gain. And semaglutide and tirzepatide are going to help to counter that side effect of high cortisol. Okay. So that's one way that semaglutide is going to affect cortisol. It's not going to, that way is like a secondary. It's not a direct effect. But I did find in preparing for this podcast, I did find another a research study that I'm going to kind of recap for you, where semaglutide actually can help with cortisol levels. Okay. This is a study back from 2018. So people that think that GLP-1s and GIPs are like so new, these have been around for a long time. They've been around since the mid 2000s. This particular study on semaglutide was back from 2008, published in 2018. And it looked at people that had diabetes. So they started with 38 patients and then 35 were actually included in the study. So these were people that had diabetes. They gave them let's see, basically they were getting sugar in an IV. And then what they did was they actually they stopped the influx of sugar, and they induced a low blood sugar state. They induced hypoglycemia. Okay. So these people were getting sugar through an IV. Again, they stopped it. And so that allowed their blood sugar to go down, and their blood sugar to go low. So just to clue you in, we talked about things that stress our body, causing a release in cortisol. Well, low blood sugar is actually one of those things that will cause a release of cortisol in order to bring our blood sugar up. Remember, I said our body is always going to be working towards keeping things even keel, getting back to normal. So our blood sugar goes low, our blood sugar drops, our body fight or flight is going to get triggered in order to release cortisol and bring our blood sugar back up, so that we can feel better. Okay, so again, this was looking again at people with diabetes, but I think the findings can still be applied to people that maybe don't have diabetes and are taking these medications just solely for weight loss. But so what happens, they clamp the IV tubing, they stop the flow of sugar in, the blood sugar went down. And what they did was they measured all these hormones. They measured something called glucagon, and they called it other regulatory hormones. So these are going to be other hormones, other one's called catecholamines. They're things that our body releases under stress. So one of those was noradrenaline. So think adrenaline, right? Your fight or flight is triggered and your adrenaline releases. It's going to give you energy, brings up your blood pressure and your heart rate. So again, that your muscles, your cells, you can like fight or flee. The other thing it looked at was again cortisol. And what they found was they had two wings or two arms of the study. They had people that were taking semaglutide and people that were not taking semaglutide, were placebo. And what they found was that the people who were taking semaglutide did not, have the swings, did not have the release of these counter-regulatory hormones the way that the people who were not taking semaglutide did. So basically, how can I say that better? So basically, the people who were taking semaglutide, they didn't experience as much of a profound shift. Basically, the semaglutide helped to keep their body more even keel, and that drop in blood sugar was not as stressful on their body. So therefore, cortisol, they didn't have as high a cortisol or noradrenaline release because it wasn't as stressful on their body, versus people who were not taking the semaglutide, from what they could tell, because of the release in hormones, it was more stressful on the body. So this is looking, what are the things we can take away from this? Again, this was a study done in diabetic patients. It was looking particularly at hypoglycemia, meaning low blood sugar. So, right, we can experience stress in other ways, not just blood sugar. But what this study is showing is that, again, we're seeing better control. Seeing better control in the people that are taking semaglutide. So I don't think you can take from that like, okay, well, semaglutide is going to make me handle stress better. But what we can take from that is that semaglutide is going to help your body, specifically with swings in blood sugar, with low blood sugar. It's not as stressful on the body, and so therefore you're not having, again, those releases in those stress hormones. From that could potentially, we guess that if you are experiencing other stressors that are going to cause a release in the adrenal hormones, could that release not be as profound? It's possible. I don't think you could take from this one study that, like, again, oh, it's going to do all these magical things, but we're seeing evidence that it's going to help keep things more balanced. I will tell you, what I love about these studies is that when I look at patients from a functional medicine perspective, from that optimal range, anytime somebody is dealing with fatigue, they're dealing with adrenal issues, I know that they're dealing with blood sugar issues, even if they're not diabetic. Okay. So even I have a woman that works with me. She's very healthy, really watches what she eats well, exercise, her whole family exercise. They all eat healthy. I think she has a genetic predisposition. She has a parent that does have diabetes. We've not done genetic testing with her, but she has a family history of diabetes. And what we're seeing is that her body just doesn't really she has a harder time handling her blood sugar. And my guess is this is a genetic predisposition for her. So again, her body is just set up in a way where her body doesn't handle sugar as well, versus somebody that might not have the same genes, right? Their body might be able to handle sugar a little better. Where was I going with this? But what I see is that, again, with those swings in energy, the adrenals, when those are taxed, and when weight is an issue, what I know from, again, looking at things from that functional medicine perspective, is that blood sugar and insulin are an issue that's driving their weight gain. And so this is why I love that these medications have been approved in people that are not diabetic for weight loss, because that's the mechanism of action, right? That's what's caused the weight gain in the first place, right? Is this dysregulation in the hormones, this dysregulation in the blood sugar and insulin, and a lot of other hormones that we're not going to get into today. But that's how these injections work, is that they're going to help to bring down blood sugar and insulin, as well as some other mechanisms of action. So I think, personally, in practice, what I do is looking at, okay, even though these studies are done in people that have diabetes, I will tell you that I'm not saying this is what other people do out there, but again, just looking from my perspective of, even if somebody's not diabetic, if these are the issues, blood sugar and insulin is still a problem. So what we're seeing in the data, what we're seeing, from the research from people with diabetes, these same things are going on. The way that these medications are affecting people's bodies that have diabetes, it's gonna affect people that don't have diabetes, just maybe not to that same degree, right? Because when we think of blood sugar problems, it's on a sliding scale. It's not like there's a switch turned on that's like, you're diabetic or you're not diabetic. It's a scale. So we have normal blood sugar, we have above optimal blood sugar. Of course, we have below optimal blood sugar too. When we look at diabetes, we have normal blood sugar, we have above optimal blood sugar, we've got like pre-diabetes, then we have finally diabetes. So that same effect, right? It's going to be working the same way anywhere along the spectrum. Just the people that have blood sugar down here, their problem might not be as bad as people that are up here and actually have that diagnosis of diabetes, if that makes sense. So let's recap. I know I kind of went a little, I hope that I'm explaining this in a way that's helping you to understand. But just to recap, so semaglutide and tirzepatide, again, those are those incretin hormones that are going to be released in the gut in response to eating food. Again, we can supplement these through these injections, right? And they are going to affect blood sugar and insulin. They also slow down digestion, and they affect that those addictive tended like hunger drive. But we're seeing in the data that they also could potentially affect cortisol levels, right? And that hypoglycemia, particularly low blood sugar, is not going to be as stressful on the body, causing release in more cortisol when somebody is taking semaglutide. In particular, this study was on. But again, what we're seeing is that when often in the women that I work with, what I see is that cortisol has caused weight gain because many times there are healthy women that are exercising, that are eating healthy. Cortisol is from stressors, is driving up blood sugar and insulin. And something like semaglutide or tirzepatide can help to bring down that effect that cortisol has had on the body. Okay. All right. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to end it there. We've got one more episode, well, two more episodes that we're coming back in with on semaglutide and tirzepatide. So you can expect one later this week and another next week. And I do want to invite you, if you are, if you've taken semaglutide or tirzepatide, maybe you're on them right now, you're seeing success, you want to know more. I've got a master class coming up where I'm talking all about weight loss with semaglutide and tirzepatide. Also, I want to encourage you, if I've had some people writing in the comments on YouTube, if you've taken these medications before and you haven't seen the results that you want to come to this masterclass, because I'm going to explain the things that might have happened that, kept you from being as successful as you want to, and what you can do if you want to try them again. Also, if you're just interested, maybe you're like, I've wanted to take these medications, but I'm just not sure about them. Come to this masterclass. All right. It's going to be next Wednesday, July 31st. We're going to hold it in the evening, 7 p.m. Eastern. So I encourage you, if you register, please join us live so that I can answer all your questions. It will be going out to replay for everybody who does register for it. So if you're unable to make it live, we will send out the replay, or you can always watch live and then watch it again, to get more information. Okay. So that link will be below in the show notes. If you're watching if you're listening on a podcast platform, or in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. And I will see you in the next episode.